Okay, so I'm going to get started. It sounds like we had a little bit of everything, ranging from freshmen to even someone that already has a student in college. So I'll try to keep that in mind with the presentation. It's a little bit of everything anyways. But then again, at the end, if you have a more specific question, feel free to go ahead and ask that for your individual situation. I'm trying to keep an eye on the chat also, but I'll probably look at that more towards the end and try to get caught up on any kind of questions you guys may have. So just a little about me to get started so that you know who's talking to you. My name is Tanika Johnson, and I was formerly an English teacher, and how I kind of came about working for college, doing college planning is basically when I was a teacher, on the side of being an English teacher, was helping a lot of students with their applications and their essays and proofreading. And then it kind of just spiraled to just kind of helping on the side. Our counselor was great, but she had a ton of students and couldn't really give that personalized attention. And I just kind of noticed a lot of students, you know, how much they didn't know. And it reminded me of myself when I was going off to college and realizing, wait, nothing's changed in 13 years. Just a lot of misinformation out there. Honestly, when I was applying, I didn't even know people went out of state. I didn't know that was a thing. I didn't know there were strategies to pay for college. I just thought, you know, I had to take on this debt, and by any means necessary, that's what I had to do. So when I realized that's still what was happening, I just got a really strong passion for helping families and students not make that same error, if you will, that I did. So now I do college planning independently. My mission is just, you saw on the last slide, to make this exciting again. I think unfortunately there's a lot of stress that comes with this, and I want to try to relieve that for people as much as possible and make it an enjoyable experience again. So just some overview real quick of what we're going to touch on today. So how to get your student up ready for college, so that can start as early as freshman year and ongoing. When it is that time, how we can build our best and most strong college list. Of course, we're going to go over how to apply a little bit. I got a few questions and via email before this even started, that paying for it, of course, is a huge stress point, and then how we're going to make the final decision. So hopefully a little bit of everything, and I can start easing some of that anxiety already. So ongoing things that we should be doing again as early as freshman year, of course. I'm sure we know this, right? Keeping that GPA as high as possible. And I really italicize possible because I do mean that, right? Your student does not need to be this 4.5 GPA student to get into college. That's just not true. I mean, then we wouldn't have the college system existing. So highest GPA possible. If they're not a straight A student, they will be okay, but they should be trying as hard as they can in all their classes naturally anyways. And then going along with that, while maintaining a strong GPA, they should be trying to take as many challenging courses as they can handle. Again, every student's different. They do not need to be taking every single AP honors class available to them, stressing themselves out, and then maybe their grades do slip a little because they're trying so hard to have these really rigorous course loads. Not necessary. I mean, if they can handle it, if you have that kid that's getting straight A's in all their honors classes, awesome. But I do just want to put it out there for the parents that don't have students like that, they will go to college, they will be totally fine. Outside of grades, your student does want to hopefully get involved in some activities. This part should be easier, maybe because it's more enjoyable, right? It's not just sitting in history class because they have to. It's starting to say, hey, what do I like doing? What can I spend my time in? And something I do want to draw attention to is, I think in the past, there was a lot of talk that students should do as much as they can, right? They should be in student council, and then they should be president of this club, and then they should be an athlete, and they should do this and dabble in a whole bunch of things. And it's not that that's bad, but with talking to admissions counselors, what I'm finding more and more is they don't necessarily need the student that does everything. They need to start seeing that a student is passionate about maybe 1, 2, maybe 3 things. So what that would mean is, if your student from a younger age, freshman, sophomore year, starts being interested in, just say, maybe they want to be a nurse or in any kind of medical field. As they start, they should go in as depth in that as they can. So maybe for their volunteer service, they are volunteering at a hospice center, something like that. And maybe they also start a club at their school, something like Future Nurses of America or something like that. And then, of course, their classes, we would think they're taking their sciences, maybe all 4 years, even if it's only 3 years are required at your school. And now this shows to the admissions people, wow, you know, the student has their path ready, they're passionate about something, they kind of know what they want and they went for it. Not that it's bad to dabble in a little bit of everything, especially if that's what your student likes. In the end, they should always be doing what makes them happy, but they don't need to. I just want that shift. They do not need to be involved in every single activity on campus and to set themselves apart in the application pool. And then going off of that, that is what the goal is. You know, you want to be yourself and be authentic. Don't do things just for the application process, but you do want to try to think, how can I set myself apart even a little bit, right? I mean, being president of student council is awesome, but you have to think of the thousands and thousands of high schools across the country, which means therefore there are thousands and thousands of presidents of student council. You know, if you have time, if they're a little younger, maybe work with them, or if they ever have ideas to start something new and or kind of do some summer activity that no other kid seems to be doing, those are the kind of things that are going to help make them stand out on their applications that are really cool. Next, everyone's favorite topic, standardized tests. So SAT or ACT, it doesn't matter which one. I do get that question sometimes, like which is better, or do colleges accept all of them? And the answer is yes, either one works. Not one is preferred anywhere. My recommendation usually with students is to, if they have the time, to take one of each online. There's full-length practice tests, and then see if they do better on one or the other, and then try to pursue that one. They're really similar. I mean, you know, they're timed tests. There are a little bit of differences though, like the ACT has a science section, for example, whereas the SAT doesn't. So there are some differences and you can kind of play around with that. Something I definitely want to address, first bullet point, is the phrase test optional, because that's a hot phrase going around right now with COVID. A lot of the test dates, if you have a senior, I'm sure you know, and maybe even if you have a junior and you were trying to get some of those dates, a lot of them were canceled because of the pandemic, all of that. So there's been some shifts this year that haven't been previously, of some schools saying, okay, we're going test optional this year. And so I've had some students come and say, well, I'm not taking my test. The schools I like are all test optional. And so I just want to be clear that every school is going to have their own policy. So you can always contact the schools you like directly. But test optional is usually in regards to admissions, right? So they could still get accepted based on everything else, their grades, their essay, their extracurricular activities. However, they might get admitted without a standardized test, but still, if you read most schools' policies, not all, but a lot of schools' policies are still saying, hey, we're going to use those tests still for merit aid, which is the financial aid that comes from things like their grades and their test scores. So they are still important, especially if your kid is a good test taker. If they're not, again, it's a holistic approach and they have other things that will buffer them. But if you look at this chart here, for example, I'm sorry if it's small on your screen, I'm just going to summarize anyways. I mean, I think a lot of people don't realize that yes, all those extras do help. Don't get me wrong, the essay and the activities, but a lot of schools still do something like this. A simple matrix. Across one side is their test scores, across the other side is their GPA. They find where those meet, and it's just a set amount of money they're planning to give that students. So if they don't take the test at all, you know, they might have some other standard for how they're going to award the money, but had they had that test score, they maybe could have perhaps gotten more. Another note on that, outside of this year being crazy and test optional, so those of you that have a younger student, so maybe in the coming years, schools won't be test optional anymore, then it will show you how much these tests matter in regards, again, to merit aid. Your student, if they're not a great test taker, they'll probably still be okay getting accepted based on other factors. But if you're wondering, well, I'm worried about paying for school, the time that they spend kind of prepping for these tests can really mean thousands of dollars, especially if you look, of course, on the cusps. So let's say you see this light blue where it borders up with the gold. It's just 1 point on the ACT, right? And it's just a few more points on the SAT. But if you look, the difference between the light blue scholarship award amount and the gold is $4,000. And that's for 1 year. So working a little hard on these tests sometimes can literally mean, I mean, 4,000 times 4, $16,000 from working a little bit harder and studying for those tests. test. So I just want to put that out there. A lot of the merit aid has to do with these tests, and they might say test optional, but that's for admissions. There's another policy called test blind where they truly don't look at all, and it doesn't help, it doesn't hurt. But the test optional, I would just look at the schools your student's interested in and see what their policy really is on these standardized tests. So hopefully this slide is more, we're starting to get maybe into sophomore or junior year. We're trying to be a good student. We're trying to prep for our tests. We're trying to join the clubs and start new activities. I mean, as we get further and further along, closer to the college process, you know, a student should start thinking long term, right? What do I want for a job? What major do I need to get there? It's not the end of the world if they know, right? Because when they go off, they're 17, 18. We all know that a lot of us aren't doing what we thought we'd be doing, or maybe what our degree is in, or we didn't even get the degree, all of those good things. But why this is semi-important, of course, first of all, it's a great factor to start narrowing down the college search, right? There's over 4,000 schools across the country. You're going to need something to start narrowing it down. So a major is a great thing, because if you do know what you want to study, or the student knows what they want to study, and a school doesn't have it, it's kind of like, why even look at that school, right? They're not going to help them get to the next step. So that already can eliminate schools that don't have their major. Secondly, so say you go into school, your student goes into school undecided. Is it the worst thing? Of course not. Again, they may be 17, 18, they don't know what they want to do yet. It makes sense. The only issue around that is if they take too long to decide, say junior year, it's very likely they'll have to stay longer than the traditional 4 years to make sure they can get all the credits needed for their degree, which obviously in turn costs their time and their money. So just something to think of there. And when I say potential for better opportunities, again, what I mean there is maybe you're making sure you have strong programs. Some schools roll grad school and undergraduate together into a 5-year program where that normally would take the 6 years. So that could be awesome if you already start on one of those paths and you stay with that path. That can be really helpful. Again, not the end of the world if they change their majors, things like that, but sometimes that can end up taking longer and more time in school. Here's just some guidance. When I work with students, I give them different career assessments. I put one on here that's free, Truity, and I think it's mostly free. And then of course, if you want those really extensive results, you can pay more, but the results that they give you for free are pretty awesome. So career tests, of course, as we know, research and shadowing, all those kind of things are going to be helpful. And then if you're helping them through their process or they're thinking on their own, I would say, genuinely, what do they like, right? What would they wake up early on a Saturday morning to go do? What would they do if they couldn't put it on their college applications? What kind of lifestyle do they like? I'm someone who I could never just work in a cubicle and cold call people all day, but someone might be awesome at that. So they're getting older and they start probably having ideas of what they see. They might think they like the medical field. Do they know that they might have to work holidays, weekends, evenings, things like that? Or is it just what they saw, on Grey's Anatomy? So start investigating those kind of things to guide them. This I just put on here, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, just one resource. There's, again, plenty of resources out there, but as you can see, this is just a screenshot. But you search a job and you can start thinking, again, I would have them do this or sit with them or something. Really, what do they do and what is the work environment? Is there going to be growth in that job field? You can kind of explain to them that you might think you want this job, but if it's a dying field, maybe is that more of a hobby? How do we want to approach that situation? Okay, so as they start thinking, again, they're each of these are building on each other, right? They're being a great student. They're starting to pursue their interests. They're thinking about their majors. So it's around that time you can start doing this. You can start thinking, of course, as early as freshman, sophomore year, but it's much more likely the college list stuff comes about more junior year. Seniors, I'm hoping if those of you that have seniors, they already have some ideas of schools, and then more when we get to the application and financial aid part, that can help you. If they haven't yet, though, they do still have time. It's September, it's crunch time, but they do still have some time to investigate some schools and make sure that they're a good fit for them. So I always say there's 3 pillars. A school should fit them academically, financially, and socially. So let's chat about those. First and foremost, kind of like we already addressed, if the school doesn't have the major that your student is thinking of, again, why go there? It would be kind of silly. And if your student's in between a couple things, then you can investigate for that too, right? Do they have biology and environmental science? And just make sure that if they do switch, they kind of have that opportunity to stay at that school and still have a strong program as well. And then will they be successful? So I've met some students that think that, you know, those standards of grades or test scores to get into the school are barriers, but they really are there to see, will you be successful at our college based on our rigor, or will you struggle? You know, they don't want you to struggle at their school any more than, you know, the student wants to. So that's what kind of some of those averages are for. Not to make anyone feel bad if their GPA is not high enough. There is a school for them out there, maybe just not that school. So you can find all of this information online. The way I would kind of look at this is, if your student is in the top 25% or so, we can't guarantee anything ever, but very, very likely that they are going to get accepted. And not only accepted, they will probably excel. And then honestly, that's where schools are going to give their most money. They want these top candidates. So I know some students want to look at these, you know, really prestigious big name schools, and that's awesome. Also, there's nothing, of course, wrong with those schools. They're fabulous. But what if you have a really bright student and they go to the university that maybe the university as a whole is in some big prestigious, almost Ivy League school, but they are in the top, you know, 10% at that school? They're going to get so many opportunities. They might even qualify for the school's honors program. A lot of those, if you look into them, are full rides or close to full rides. So now maybe the school's not the top school in the country, but now they're one of the top students at said school, and so many opportunities are going to be open for them. And then moving down a list, you know, if you're in the middle, if the student's in the middle 50%, you know, they're the average student there, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's very likely they'll get accepted, but maybe they won't get as much financial aid. So again, if financial aid is important to you, that's where the strategy of planning ahead really can help. There's just a few safety schools where your student would be in more than the top 25% is where acceptance and financial aid is going to be. And then if your student is in the bottom 25%, we call these reach schools. Nothing's wrong with having, you know, a big goal, a big dream, but we just have to be honest with our students that, you know, they may not get admitted because they're in the lower tier there. And then even if they are, there's a chance they might struggle because all these other students, you know, have higher academic rigor than them. And then again, if finances are your concern, it's not likely that they're going to get much money from the schools, because they're going to start with their top 25%, trickle down to their middle 50%, and anything remaining would go to the bottom 25%. So there wouldn't be as much left there. Next, the financial fit, and we are going to spend some time on this in a little bit because like I said, I got a few early questions and a lot of them centered around finances, which I totally understand. So again, the first part, again, the quickest strategy you can do are find schools that your student is one of the top candidates in that top 20, 25%, because that's naturally where they're going to get a lot of their money from. I do want to say don't rule out private schools. I'm not biased either way, but what I've seen in my experience is some families just immediately say, no, we're not even looking at private schools, which again, I understand, because when you see a price tag of $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 for 1 year, it's terribly frightening. But a lot of those schools do give out really good financial aid, and they have a little more wiggle room too, because they have endowments or private donors, and sometimes, again, they can be more flexible. So again, often they are still more pricey than the, you know, state school, and that makes sense, but I wouldn't completely rule them out. I'd at least give them a chance. Another thing with finances, I would think long-term. You can, again, find all this information online, or you can contact the school directly always. I would check their graduation rates. So I think we still think college is 4 years, traditional bachelor's degree, 4 years in and out, and that's it. And unfortunately, that's not as common as it used to be. It's becoming so much more common for people to take 4.5, 5, upwards of 6 years to get their bachelor's degree, just depending on different circumstances. So I would check schools' graduation rates and see how many students are graduating in the traditional 4 years. Because if that percentage is super low, you know, it's like, why would your student be any different? They might be one of those people that only, you know, 9% are graduating in 4 years, but they might be in the majority with the other students that are taking longer to graduate, which again is not only more time, but of course more money. And then secondly, the retention rate, you can check that too. There's data on after someone attends as a freshman at these colleges, what percent of them return for a sophomore year. This isn't going to be 100. People leave health, they're homesick, they genuinely don't like the school, they can't afford it, whatever reason it is. But the higher these are, the better, because that means, they like the school, they're doing well, less likely they'll transfer, and again, maybe lose credits, time, money in the process of all that. Another thing to think about is that long game, right? If your student is pretty sure what they want to do, I would start thinking, well, what's that average salary, and how does that compare against perhaps what potential debt they are taking on? And that's, a very specific situation. But if they are trying to pursue a field that is usually a very high income field, and they take on, and just throwing numbers out there, $20,000 in debt, but they're expected to make six figures pretty easily. Well, in comparison, that might be doable for them or your family. However, if they were like me and went on to be a private school teacher, I basically took on the same amount of loans as my salary was. That shouldn't have happened. That wasn't right. So just kind of considering those things. And then I just really preach use logic, not emotions on this one. I really think it's crazy in the college world. It seems like every other thing we set the budget first, right? A wedding, a car, a house. We say, well, this is our budget, and then you find something that fits. And something in college seems twisted the other way. Like, we look at schools we like, and then we figure out how are we going to pay for this. And it can end up really sad when kids have put their hearts into school and then we can't afford it. So I would just say, use that logic first. If it's not in the budget, it's just not. But there's going to be fabulous options that are. And lastly, just pretend money wasn't an option and every school had the major the kid wants. The social fit is that last factor that really makes it kind of feel like home for them. So is it close to home? Is it further away? Are you ready? Is your student ready to explore and go crazy? Or do they want to also stay close to home for some weekend home cooked meals? Do they want to be in the middle of some big city, or are they kind of okay with a little more of a rural area? Do they like small classrooms? Do they thrive off of getting to know their teachers and their classmates and those intimate discussions? Or does that actually terrify them and they want to kind of just be a number? Or do they like the options that come with a large university? Those kind of things we should start thinking of. And then I just put a ton of things under other opportunities. Do they care about diversity and they want to find a school that also appreciates diversity? Do they want a school that's going to be religious, have a religious affiliation? Do they already think maybe they want to do a study abroad program and they want to see what opportunities are there for them? I mean, even food options, right? If your student is vegan or has a ton of allergies, that's something you want to make sure that when they're away from home, they can still eat properly and have good options for them. So a ton of things out there. Football or sports, right? Maybe they don't want to play themselves, but they always thought on Saturday, everyone would go watch the football games and school spirit, all those other kind of things you want to start thinking of too. And an easy way to do that is going and touring the school, that social fit. A lot of times these tours really kind of seal the deal. The student can just picture themselves on campus and they walk away all happy, or the opposite. They thought they loved a school, they stepped foot, it just doesn't feel like it's clicking for them. And that's good to know too. Of course, right now, COVID's made it hard to go on tours. There, of course, I'm sure you know, some virtual tours you can look at. And then some schools I know are opening back up for tours, so you can try. But of course, right now, you can just do the best you can. You can always apply. If your student thinks they really like a school, they could always apply and tour. If they get accepted, they can still tour after, but before they have to make their decision. So that's an option. College fairs are great if your school hosts one, or sometimes local community centers or libraries host college fairs where you can just walk around, where your student would walk around to a whole bunch of options and kind of learn about them all in one place, which is pretty cool. And then if you do get to go on tours, especially those of you that have some younger students that hopefully the pandemic lifts and soon enough will return back to normal, I always just say be picky, ask the right questions. I think we have to remember they are businesses too, and they pay these tour guides, right? And they're gonna take you to the newest dining hall and the fanciest dorm. And some schools these days have things like lazy rivers and just things that bait the students in and get so excited that I think there's also other questions we need to be asking, right? You can ask what does your friend's school have that yours doesn't and you wish you had, something like that. Or you can ask them, have you ever had a horror story with one of your professors, and can you tell me about it and be honest, what happened? And just things that you kind of want to know, the real truth, not just what they're showing you that looks all pretty on the tour. Lastly, kind of going along with tours is this concept called demonstrated interest. It's something I'm super passionate about that, again, I just don't think they tell families. So what this is, I just want to explain, especially those of you that have younger kids, this can be really, really helpful for you. What this is the second your student makes contact with a school, they basically start building a file around them. So just say, summer after sophomore year, your son saw the school's baseball team on TV and it seemed like they had a lot of school spirit. He says that would look really fun to go there. So he just goes on their website and, they have those forms like, for more information, fill this out. So say he fills that out, that immediately now they are going to start like a little file on him. And then say, you guys start up junior year, still thinking of that school, and you guys go on a college visit. That's a second point of contact. When it's time for him to take his standardized test, you write schools down that you're thinking of. No commitment, but you can fill them in, and he fills out that school. Then say spring of junior year shows up, and he's still thinking about that baseball team, so he contacts a coach now. That's another point of contact. And then say, fall of senior year comes, and he wants to ask a few questions to the admissions counselor or the financial aid counselor. And so he contacts them for that too. That's another point of contact. And then of course he applies. That, I think I lost count, but that's 6 or 7 points of contact. Whereas another student might just apply because it's a backup or because their mom went there and she's been nagging him to apply to her alma mater. That's 1 point of contact. So that's not going to be the end all be all. Like that's not going to be the factor of why someone picks a certain student necessarily, but you do have to keep in mind that if 2 candidates are completely even, that could be the tipping point. Or again, if you build these relationships with schools and you just show, I'm so interested, I will make a difference to your student body, I'm a passionate an individual in general, they're going to remember that kid. And maybe that kid maybe your family can't afford to send that kid there. And they express that and they've built a relationship. They might be able to find some money if they really feel strongly a relationship that the student has shown their interest from 3 years prior, 2 years prior. So especially if you have a younger student, that's something that I feel very strongly about, that they don't tell families enough. Families even do unofficial tours and just walk around campus, but the school would never know you were there, so that wouldn't count towards demonstrated interest. Okay, so now it's time to apply. We've done our tours, all of that good stuff. There's no rules on this, but my recommendation to my students are around 6 to 10 colleges that they actually want to go to, a couple of those safety schools where they're a top candidate, a couple schools that they match pretty perfectly average with the grades and GPA, and then sure if they want a couple of reach schools too, because you never know, and why not chase your dreams? Totally fine. Of course, just like anything kind of else in life with students and all of that, you want to encourage them to apply as early as possible and stay organized, pay attention to deadlines. It would be nice if it was easier than this, but unfortunately, every college is a little different with their deadlines, and then each item that they need might have different deadlines too, right? I know some schools that have scholarship opportunities that their deadline is this month in September, even though their general application isn't due till December. So a kid could be filling that out in October and still feel like, wow, I'm really ahead of the game, but they missed a deadline for a scholarship. So, which I think, is shady and unfortunate, but not my choice, I guess. And then other things, right? Like getting their transcripts, getting their letters of recommendation, that's depending on someone else, their teachers, their counselors. So they want to give their teachers and counselors a heads up also that they need those things. You can't do that, 2 days before and expect a nice letter of recommendation because the teacher didn't have time to put effort into that. And then, of course, just the standard, make sure, they're reading through it, maybe have a second look of eyes looking over it, make sure they're actually answering all of the questions, all of that kind of easy stuff. But if they're rushed, they won't have as much time to proofread. Similar with the essay, that's of course part of the application. This can be a super scary part for a lot of students because, it's the only part where the school can actually hear the student's voice in their story, right? They're not just data, a GPA, test scores. What were you involved in? Although that kind of crafts the story in itself, this is the one chance they really have to just be authentically themselves, give a little bit of insight into who they are, what they're passionate about, what they can bring to the campus, all of those kind of things. So what I really say here is, it's, again, the whole application should be crafting your story and why you are more unique than the next kid that they're going to look at, and what you are going to bring to their campus. Again, you know, they're not going to invite 79 student council presidents to their school because of that factor, because that would be like the same kind of students. They want a whole bunch of other things going on. So being unique and showing that you stand out and that you're going to bring some value to their campus is awesome. So again, make sure they're proofreading. If they can get a couple sets of eyes on it, their English teacher, whoever, that's awesome. Make sure they're answering the prompt. I've read essays of students that it's a wonderful essay. It really is. It's a beautiful story, but it really didn't answer what the question was asking. So to be careful there. And then of course, proofreading and making sure, again, there's enough time to do all of the edits. And then I have a lot of students type their essay into Google Doc and copy and paste it over into the application. And when they've been rushed, I've seen them forget to copy like the last sentence or two. And so when they paste it and they didn't realize it, the admissions counselors don't get the like last two concluding sentences, which could have been a really important part. So something to keep in mind too. Okay, last section, paying for college, probably maybe one of the most important parts. So I'm going to just hit the tip of the iceberg here the best I can. This one is super complicated. As I'm sure we know, there's a lot more that goes to it. So I'm going to scratch the surface, and then of course, you know, I'll be around for questions and all of that as well. Okay, so the first thing, the FAFSA. If you have a senior, you probably should have heard of this. If you have younger students, maybe not yet. Stands for the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. Keyword is free. There are scam websites out there that look just like it, and then they try to charge you to fill out your application. That is not a thing. It is free. It's a scam if they're trying to charge you. So here's the actual website. You still have some time on this. This opens October 1st. You could do some things in advance, like get your ID to log in. You can they start telling you what you need, like tax statements, all of that. And they actually, this gets a little detailed, but they actually look at your prior year taxes. So if you have a senior, you know, going in, or someone going to school 2020, they'd be looking at 2018 taxes. So just something in mind for those of you that do have younger students. I do feel like some people think, well, she's a freshman, he's a sophomore, it's too early to all that stuff. But this kind of stuff, you know, when you start working on financial planning, the earlier the better, of course. One more thing about the FAFSA, it does have, I've seen a few stats, so that's why I didn't, you know, cite it, but around a 90% error rate, which is crazy. I mean, you know, there's just so much room for money there that if you're making these mistakes and not filling it out properly, you might miss out on free money, which we don't want for you. So do what you got to do. You know, that's why there's experts here to look over these, make sure you're not making those mistakes. But the website does a pretty good job of, you know, explaining each line and how to do it. But I would just say, you know, don't wait to the last minute. And some schools, not all, but some are first come, first serve. So I would say as close to October 1st as you can, get in there and complete your FAFSA. The next acronym that we'll start learning, and again, even if you do have a freshman, sophomore, you start hearing this jargon and it gets all a little overwhelming. So I think sooner better anyway. So you might start hearing this acronym EFC. It stands for Expected Family Contribution. So what's going to happen is when you're filling out the FAFSA, they use a formula, and based on all the information you put in there, they come up with an amount of money that they think your family can pay for 1 year of college. Now, most families, when they get the number back, they're blown away, right? It might say something like $43,000. And most families are like, where do you think we just have $43,000 laying around? We don't. So that's where some of the panic ensues and worried about paying for college and all of this. If you're a little earlier and you don't want to just be, you know, caught off guard with what they think your EFC is going to be, there are calculators online. You can start poking around and getting an estimate, and that might start just helping some of the planning happen. But yes, this is what they say. Hey, based on our formulas and everything you have and your income and your assets and all of that, this is what it seems like your family can pay for 1 year of college. Last acronym, COA, cost of attendance. So Every school is going to have this number. It's for 1 year, which I know some of these are like, again, $80,000 something dollars, where people think it maybe that's got to be for all 4 years, but it's not, unfortunately, for some of those pricey private colleges. It is everything though, right? So we're talking now tuition, we're talking their room and board, which is also their food, non-billed things though that aren't direct charges, but estimated, again, books, transportation, getting around, personal expenses. They try to do an estimate of that. Of course, not like going crazy on the weekends, eating and drinking and all that kind of stuff. That's not in there, but it's for 1 year of college, what they think you probably will have to pay to attend there. So this is the main formula. So all these acronyms came together. So for every school, you're going to have your cost of attendance. It's different, basically every single school. Whereas your EFC is not different. That's just say across the board, they're saying you can pay $10,000 a year. So when you subtract the EFC, that's what you're eligible for. So easy math, because I'm an English background, not a math background. If a cost of attendance at a school is $50,000 and they think you can pay $10,000 every year, that means there's a missing gap of $40,000, and that's where now they're going to figure out how to help you pay for that. Some is going to come from the school, some can come from the FAFSA. Of course, we'll talk about some private outside options as well. So you're eligible for what's the difference. So here's a nice visual. I think, again, it doesn't change what school you go to. So it's not like the private school, your EFC goes up or anything like that. Again, no matter what, they're saying wherever you go, this is what we think you can bring to the table, and then you're eligible for the difference, essentially, from the cost of attendance to your EFC. Here are the differences. So again, no matter what college this person goes to, the family is supposed to pay $5,000, and now, there's a missing gap towards the cost of attendance. They're eligible for some financial aid help. So a few different types. If we don't know, grants and scholarships are the holy grail, right? That's the free one, does not need to get paid back. It can be from the school itself. It can be federal aid, state aid, private scholarships, all of that kind of stuff. I put a little asterisk by private scholarships because I want to do a quick note on it. Probably don't have enough time for all the things that I could say about that, but a quick thing I want to put out there is, if you're taking notes or anything, there's a phrase called scholarship displacement. And what that is some schools, not all of them, but some schools, and you can ask, will, if you get a private outside scholarship, you have to report those legally when you apply. That's just the way it goes. And then some schools look at that and they actually do choose to adjust the financial aid package they were going to give you, because if you think about it, that extra outside money, now you have less of a need. A lot of families think, they can stack those on top of each other and use all of it. And at some schools you can, but some schools unfortunately replace the money they were going to give you because you got this private outside money. So just keep that in mind as you're going through this process, and I would try to find out sooner rather than later, so you don't spend time on these outside scholarships if it's just going to replace money that the school was going to give you, and you could have spent that time just say, I'm studying for the SAT and getting 1 point higher and $4,000 more a year. Again, I can expand on that if we have time, but that's something I think some families don't know. Loans, of course, we know, unfortunately need to be paid back. You might get offered some by the federal government, which will have the best interest rate. I think they're at an all-time low right now of 2.75 because of the pandemic. So it's better, but of course still needs to pay back. And the third one is work study, which is for super needy families. They allow a student to have a job on campus that they can help pay towards cost. And then why it's nice is it doesn't affect their income for future financial aid. So normally say they were going to make $2,000 a year. Well, when they fill out the FAFSA next year, it counts as income, and then maybe your financial aid would go down a little, but this doesn't count towards that, which is kind of nice. And then just a refresher, I think I've sort of been mentioning it, but I don't know if I ever got specific. Remember, merit-based awards are from your student and basically what they do, right? Their grades, their test scores, if they have any artistic or athletic abilities, and they get awards for that. And then need-based aid is strictly going to be based on your family's income, what you can or cannot afford, and then they'll try to make up the difference with need-based aid. Usually it's a combo of both. Some, of course, don't have any need-based aid because of such an extreme income, and then they get, you would probably try to find merit-based aid. Some get a combo of both. And some, if you are a low-income family and your student's really bright, you can get both and hopefully a pretty strong financial aid package, especially from certain schools. Just again, I think the visual, the financial stuff, I think can get kind of overwhelming. So just a quick visual. So again, here, if this college's cost of attendance for 1 year was $45,000, you can kind of see the visual here, right? No matter what, their EFC is $5,000. They're expected to have the $5,000 to pay, and that can be, a payment plan over the year. It doesn't have to be all at once, but they're expected to pay that. They got a pretty nice grant and scholarship. Again, all this pink red is free money, a little bit of student loan, so $5,000. I mean, your situation person to person is different. That's not as crazy, of course, as I've seen, but it's not zero, obviously. Work study is that job I was talking about that can go to paying their bills, but won't count as income. And so this school still didn't meet $5,500. So in total, of course, they would need to pay the unmet need and the EFC. So at this school, it was originally $45,000. They've kind of made it up with other things, and now they're going to pay $10,500 at this school, not the $45,000. This is just showing you, right? The award letters can vary. So all three of these schools were just pretending they're all $45,000 a year. Your EFC doesn't change again at any school you apply to. It's still at that $5,000. But as you can see here, College A gives better grants and scholarships out, and you can do that. That's where the strategy and searching and planning in advance can really help you find schools that are known for giving out really good merit aid or need-based aid. So here is a big chunk of money, and then it goes down and goes down. We kept everything else the same, and then you can see this college worked hard, so there's no unmet need. You still need to pay the $5,000, whether it's payments, grandma comes in clutch, something like that. And then you can see though each school has a little bit, these schools have some unmet need, and you still add that on to your EFC. And then here just shows how different schools can break this down, right? What type of aid they can give you. So this is an example. If they all give in some fashion $35,000 of aid, so they did meet $5,000, you still have your EFC at $5,000, but as you can see again, which school would you rather go to? Of course, this one that's giving you free money, not this school that still, adds up to $35,000, but it's all loans. That's not going to be enjoyable for anyone to pay back, what is this, $36,000. And this is again for one single year. So this is how you're going to start comparing these financial aid packages. It can be hard because sometimes they all look the same. Oh, this school gave us $40,000, this school gave us $40,000. But how? Is it in free money? Is it in money you need to pay back? That's kind of what we need to consider. And that's the net price, right? So that's what should be compared. So I know those sticker prices, again, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 are terrifying. I agree, because again, it's for 1 year. But I don't think you should let it deter you from applying if your student wants to apply. But we should know that what needs to be compared is when all the financial aid is in and you subtract all the free money out, the scholarships, grants. Now we need to compare those net prices with one another and then see which one is going to be the most feasible option for your family. You can find these, again, there's all these tools online. You can type in, University of Dayton net price calculator, and almost every school, I want to say all, but I guess I can't speak for all, most schools have their own calculator, which is important because again, every school does their aid differently based on income, based on merit, based on grades. So you can go to the specific schools you're starting to think of, put in things, your finances, your students' academics. And again, so the earlier you do this, you're not blindsided, or your poor student maybe isn't blindsided thinking that they could afford this school and then you guys can't. And so you can start doing this sooner rather than later as well. It's just called the net price calculator. You just type that in a name of a school and it should show up. So last on some financial stuff. Again, there's so much behind this, so much strategy, so much figuring out that I wish I could put it all in an hour, but I can't. So just some general thoughts that we can think about. Community college, of course, depending on your student, depending on your circumstance, they're really stepping their game up, especially lately. There used to be such a stigma, I think, around them. And now, a lot of professors double dip and they're teaching at the state school and they're teaching some classes at community college. So you can see, the caliber, they're teaching the same stuff. It's not as different as it used to be, maybe even for a year, maybe especially right now with the pandemic going on. If you keep them home for the first year, get that English and math out of the way, and then transfer, maybe you even saved, $10,000. It's something. So just thinking. Secondly, of course, it also matters how many kids are you trying to send to college. If you only have one, maybe you can figure it out as a family. If you have 4, 5, 6, I don't know, that's going to make it obviously a lot more difficult. Granted, when they calculate your EFC, one thing they consider is how many students you do have in college at the time. So that'll help you a little bit, but it's still going to be expensive to send 5 or 6 kids to college. Like I mentioned earlier, think total enrollment. Is it just going to be 4 years? Is it going to be 5 years to graduate, 6? And how much debt you're going to take on there? I would start looking at, if you're going to take out a loan or you think your family's going to have to take out a loan, just have a real conversation with your family, with your student around. Show them, hey, if you end up graduating, just say $60,000 of loans with this interest rate, or even make an approximate one, and show them, hey, that's going to be a $550 monthly payment. Is that something you want to start your life with when you're a new college grad? Or can you maybe go to the school that's giving you a better deal, because long term, you're not going to be set up for all this debt? Again, the starting salary, like we said, that might differ too. Is the average starting salary 30,000 or 90,000, and then maybe you can play around with what could possibly be more affordable. If students are considering further education, graduate school, law school, med school, again, maybe take the cheaper undergraduate route, even if it's not the school that they were dreaming of, knowing that they still have 2, 4, 6, 8 more years ahead of them in school. If you think your family, the parents are going to have to also take out a private loan, you need that much, of course, know your credit score in advance, what you're eligible for that. And then that last thing, like we said on the last slide, again, I wouldn't let the price tag scare you up front. I would be aware. I would do the calculators and try to plan in advance. But remember, again, you don't know exactly what each school is going to give you, and you want to be able to compare after you get those financial aid letter awards back. So last slide for me, and then we can do questions. So remember, when you're making the big decision, think about the 3 things. Is it a good academic fit? Does your student want to fit there socially? Does that sound good to them? And then, of course, can you afford it? Does it not set you up for a lifetime of debt? Is there a better option? Those kind of things. Compare. There's pro-con chart out there. If you signed up and I have your email, I'm going to send out that resource guide I mentioned in the description. There's a ton of resources in that guide, and one of them is a huge spreadsheet where it kind of just basically asks all the questions you could ever think of. You don't even need to fill them out all if you don't want, but to start comparing options and the finances and all of that. And then I would just say the last piece of advice I can give you is that you've got to think about, again, over 4,000 schools, so many students, there's a great fit for everyone, right? Just because your friend or your student's friends didn't like that school, or another parent said, oh, I heard blah, blah, blah about this school, your student's their own person, and it's the student that makes the school, not the other way around. So again, you can find a great fit for your student. Basically, again, depending if you're trying to go across the country or not, there's so many schools that could be a great fit, financially not put someone into a ton of debt, and make them a super happy and go off and be successful in the world. So always keep that in mind, that it's a very unique personal decision. Okay, so that is the end for me. Let me stop sharing this. There's my contact information again, and I can put in the chat too.